Let's jump right into this explainer, because we're looking at one of the absolute wildest industrial transformations in modern history. I mean, we're talking about a complete paradigm shift here. How does a nation go from barely producing a handful of outdated cars in a super protected market to becoming an undisputed multi-billion-dollar global heavyweight in manufacturing? Well, it's an incredible story of sweeping economic policy, top-tier engineering, and a scale that's honestly almost hard to wrap your head around.
Think about this for a second. For decades, owning a car in South Asia, that was a distant dream for most people. It was literally a luxury reserved for the absolute elite. But today, the reality is entirely different. Today, only Indians can buy a car at an affordable cost, primarily because it's actually made right there in India. That is a massive shift. We're looking at a region that used to rely heavily on expensive imports, but they've built up this massive domestic manufacturing engine that makes affordable mobility an everyday reality for millions.
And when we say revolution, we aren't exaggerating. Just look at the sheer volume. Back in the 1991 to 1992 timeframe, the entire country produced just about 2 million vehicles. Now, fast forward to the 2024 to 2025 period, and that number has skyrocketed to roughly 31 million vehicles across all categories. 31 million! You just don't see that kind of explosive, exponential growth without some major, foundational changes happening behind the scenes.
So how exactly did they pull this off? To get it, we really have to trace the timeline of this zero-to-hero story. Starting in 1947 and for over 4 decades after that, the market was heavily protected. Cars were ultimate status symbols, definitely not for the masses. But then, we hit 1991. This was the pivot, the absolute turning point of economic liberalization that completely rewrote the rulebook. And it's that bold shift that set the trajectory straight toward 2025, landing India exactly where it is today, a highly advanced, fiercely competitive global automotive hub.
The contrast between pre- and post-1991 is just mind-boggling. Before 91, the market was totally starved of competition. You'd have these incredibly long wait lists, sometimes years long, just to get an outdated, clunky car like the classic Hindustan Motors Ambassador. But those 1991 reforms? Total catalyst. The government basically ripped up the red tape, they ended restrictive licensing, opened the doors to 100% foreign direct investment, and integrated the country right into the global supply chain. It was literally like opening the floodgates to modern mobility.
Part 1. The Global Powerhouse Formula.
Okay, so how did India capitalize on that 91 turning point to attract pretty much every major global automaker, from Suzuki and Hyundai to Toyota and VW? Well, the foundation really comes down to 5 distinct pillars. First up, you've got a massive domestic market, over 1.4 billion people, rapid urbanization, and a middle class that's hungry for mobility. Second, highly competitive manufacturing costs. And remember, this isn't just about cheap labor, it's high-quality precision engineering. Third, a deep auto component ecosystem, making everything from engine blocks to complex wiring. Fourth, world-class engineering and software capabilities. And fifth, super dedicated government policy support. You stack all of those together, and yeah, it's an incredibly compelling pitch for global manufacturers.
Let's zoom in on that 5th pillar for a second, government policy, because these initiatives have seriously hit the fast-forward button on growth. You've got the PLI, or Production-Linked Incentive Scheme, and the FAME initiatives. Basically, PLI literally pays companies financial rewards to manufacture more locally. It drives massive scale. FAME, on the other hand, aggressively subsidizes the transition to electric vehicles, making it cheaper for consumers to buy an EV and cheaper for companies to build out the chargers. Add in some major tax reforms and massive highway expansions, and you've got a policy environment pushing the whole industry forward at warp speed.
But here's the thing, it is so important to realize that this isn't just about bending metal and assembling parts anymore. Not at all. India has successfully positioned itself as the literal brain of the modern vehicle. They are a premier global center for automotive software, AI, and complex battery management systems. I mean, Indian engineers are out there writing the code that keeps you safe on the highway and powers your autonomous driving features. Because of this, several huge multinational companies are running their most cutting-edge global R&D centers right out of India.
And all that tech dominance, it translates into staggering economic scale. The auto industry is an absolute heavyweight for the nation's treasury right now, driving nearly 15% of the entire country's goods and services tax collections. We are talking about an industry with an annual turnover of around $240 billion US. It's undeniably one of the largest, most vibrant manufacturing sectors in the country, just pumping massive amounts of capital into the national economy.
Plus, this thriving ecosystem directly and indirectly supports roughly 30 million jobs. Just let that sink in for a moment. 30 million livelihoods.
To put that into perspective, that's like the entire population of Texas or the whole country of Australia, entirely supported by this one mega industry. From factory floors to logistics, dealership sales, and software design, it's a critical backbone of the modern Indian economy.
Section 2. Going global and electric.
So having pretty much conquered the domestic market, the industry has aggressively shifted gears to take on the world. India is no longer just building for itself. Passenger vehicle exports hit record levels in 2025, with cars and components shipping to over 100 countries across Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, and Europe. This export market alone is worth roughly $37 billion. Why? Well, they've completely cracked the code for building high-quality, durable, cost-effective vehicles that work perfectly for both emerging and developed markets. It's the new go-to hub for compact cars, rugged SUVs, and now EVs.
Speaking of EVs, the electric revolution is well underway. Big players like Automotive, Mahindra, Hyundai, and VinFast are pouring historic investments into the country. But they aren't just slapping batteries into cars. We're seeing aggressive investment across the entire life cycle. Massive scale-ups in local battery production, high-speed charging networks rolling out nationwide, advanced recycling plants, and even critical semiconductor manufacturing. The goal is crystal clear here. Ensure India is right at the bleeding edge of the software-defined electric future, completely leaving fossil fuels in the rearview mirror.
Section 3. Chasing the top spot.
Now, despite this record-breaking rise, we do have to note that India is not the #1 player in the world quite yet. It's one of the fastest industrial transformations ever, for sure, but there's still a massive mountain to climb. Looking at the global race around the 2025-2026 timeframe, China is still the undisputed heavyweight champ, churning out an estimated 31 to 32 million vehicles a year, mostly driven by their crazy EV leadership. The US sits comfortably at #2 with 10 to 11 million. Japan is right behind them at 8 to 9 million with their hybrid dominance, and then, charging hard up the ranks at #4 is India, producing around 6 to 7 million vehicles. South Korea rounds out the top 5. India's big advantages in this fierce race: an exceptionally fast-growing market, unmatched cost efficiency, and that massive engineering talent pool.
But to actually close that massive gap with a giant like China, India faces some serious final boss challenges. They need a tremendous, sustained scale-up in annual production capacity, for one. They also need a significantly larger battery manufacturing ecosystem, and they've got to keep multiplying those export numbers. But perhaps most critically, they need greater localization of semiconductor and critical mineral supply chains. Right now, the global industry relies heavily on importing stuff like lithium and cobalt. To truly win this race, India has to secure and own those raw materials, not just assemble them on a factory floor.
So, considering their unmatched engineering talent, a highly educated young population, a booming middle class, and this explosive upward trajectory since those 91 reforms, I'm going to leave you with this question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Can India push past those final hurdles to eventually become the world's absolute largest car manufacturer in the coming decades? The structural advantages are definitely all there. And honestly, if the revolution of the last 30 years is any indication, betting against them might just be a big mistake. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and definitely keep your eyes on this space.